Hi, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Victoria Nicola. I'm an author who experienced a cancel mob come after me pretty aggressively last year. And so that got me thinking about various topics within the experience of cancellation, cancel culture in general, and outrage culture. And so today I wanted to explore that a little bit and explore the fickle nature of a cancel mob. Okay, so when I got canceled, as some of you know from the previous video, and as I mentioned, if you haven't seen that video, I'll post a link in the description. But when I got thrown into the trenches of cancellation, I met a lot of amazing authors who were basically experiencing similar things, and it was kind of wild. It was like the underbelly of the writing world. And I got to meet a lot of them. And honestly, it was everything from like nobody's heard of these authors. They were just like trying to like go for it and be vulnerable and release a book, and they just got piled on without having a name or a publishing house to really back them up. And they just experienced a really traumatic cancellation for oftentimes for like really arbitrary, ridiculous things. Like they mentioned, they wrote a comment in a TikTok video and all of a sudden they got canceled. To somebody who had like everybody from like mediocre followings to like middle of the road followings, like in the thousands and the tens of thousands, to somebody, even with more followers, like hundreds of thousands of followers. And all across the board, I seriously haven't met a person who deserved the cancellation. Um, it might exist. I don't know. It might exist. Um, at most, I will grant, at most, it's a difference of opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody might have a different opinion from a group that is incredibly vocal, and that group that's incredibly vocal feels this like righteous indignation and comes after this person. So, at most, like I said, difference of opinion. But what I really wanted to highlight today is just how nonsensical the cancel mob really is. In the words of Terry Pratchett, always remember that the crowd that cheers for your um, coronation is the same crowd that will applaud your beheading. People love a show. I've been thinking a lot about that. That this the outrage culture has gotten so extreme and so nonsensical that it almost feels like a Jungian archetype, like a headless Jungian archetype that just almost functions without human, like it doesn't need a human body really. It's like a possession that takes a human body. It's almost exists outside of the human realm, and it like takes possession of a crowd. Um and and then it just, there's no real rationale or logic. That's kind of how I started looking at outrage culture. um and possession is a strong word, obviously. Maybe like a psychological virus is more like set a secular perspective. Um, but anywho, I wanted to do like a specific comparison between two books that experience cancellations, and they are experience cancellations for basically the polar opposite reasons, and it highlights the irrationality of the entire experience of a cancel mob. So, book number one, it was published in 2019, called Unguarded by Marianne Rose. It was set during World War II, about a Jewish girl who flees the Nazis with the help of a German soldier who has left everything behind and everything he knew. All right. So why did this book get canceled? This book, I believe, got canceled predominantly on Book Talk, got piled on. But if you go to the Goodreads of this book, you'll still see a lot of review bombs. This is a historical fiction. I looked up the genre. It's like a historical fiction or a World War II slash Holocaust fiction, and I think it's like a light romance as well. Obviously, there's like some kind of, it's implied that there's some kind of romance happening between this German soldier and the main character, who's a Jewish girl fleeing the Nazis. Now, the reason that this book got piled on is because people were outrage at the concept of a love story, a romance, essentially, between a Nazi and a Jewish girl. Now, listen, I'm not here to tell you personally if you're okay with that or not. Okay, that's just you'll see what I mean. Let me make my arguments. Okay, I do know that it sounds like this German soldier in this book is not exactly a faithful to the National Socialist Party, right? Sounds like he's having some questions. A gray character, if you will, a morally gray character, if you will. Which, by the way, morally gray characters seem to be all the rage until it's morally gray outside of what people like or the outrage culture likes. Also, before anybody casts me under some far right Nazi apologist perspective or light, I come from a very strong background of Soviet soldiers who fought in World War II against Nazism. Like my grandfather at 17 became a commander of tanks. Okay. I am honored to be a descendant of soldiers who fought against fascism and Nazism, real fascism and Nazism. And I have a great uncle on every side who died in the war. Okay. And I might even make a video later on talking about the Soviet sacrifice in World War II because I think it's incredibly important to remember. And not because it's the communist sacrifice, but just the people that sacrifice and what they sacrificed despite the government that was oppressing them. Now, back to this topic. I want to kind of so I wanted to stress that I'm in no way an apologist for the far right, okay? And I know that sounds ridiculous to say, but these days you have to spell everything out lest somebody accuse you and try to cancel you. Um, all right. I also haven't read this book, so I cannot speak to the quality of writing or the quality of the romance or the storyline or whatever. I just know it from like what I've heard about this book, okay? Not only did the author get canceled, but anyone who said, hey, listen, maybe there's nuance in the soldier. It sounds like the soldier isn't actually a loyal Nazi. Sounds like he's questioning things. Don't we want that? Don't we want redemption arcs? Don't we want to explore people who go from some kind of like uh, dark and evil ideology to a better ideology? People who said this kind of thing got also pyloned and canceled. And I know people, that's how I know about the story. I know people who experienced that. Now, so this is how intense the cancellation for this book was. So, okay, keep in mind, they were canceling people because of the outrage that they felt on behalf of Jewish people. Fast forward, not even full 6 years later. Sorry, 6, 7. Recently, like in the last month, I don't know if you've heard of this news in the book space, but Arif Kwan also experienced a cancel mob come after her. Sorry, it's just such a ridiculous reason that I kind of laugh almost every time I talk about it. But she experienced a cancel mob that to come after her because she had the audacity to mention a character from Israel as a pianist. So like super minor character shows up to give a piano concert. Um, and people got very morally outraged at this for just the sheer mention of an Israeli character. And because of everything that's happened in Gaza and this war between Israel and Gaza. Again, caveat, I'm not trying to defend what Israel has done. And it's so ridiculous that I even have to make these like asterisk. I am not defending what governments are doing, but you know, these days you have to. So again, not defending what Israel is doing in terms of like Israel government and their stances. This is just, let's keep it in the book of, in the realm of rationality of why that book got canceled and why this book is getting canceled. For the sheer mention of an Israeli character, AKA a Jewish character, Arif Kwan is getting piled on. So think about this. This is like polar opposite reasons that the outrage mob has been kindled, okay? For writing an anti-Semitic story, which is questionable, a questionable accusation, right? Because of the nuance, um, originally in 2019, to now just sheerly mentioning the word Israel. And I know you're gonna, some of you who don't have TikTok or aren't on Book Talk might not have seen these posts, but people are quite literally upset for the sheer mention of Israel. They call it normalization. They call it normalization. Just think about the extreme nature of that concept. Israel exists, no matter if you support or not support the Israeli government. Israel exists as a nation in today's world. There are millions of people who are called Israelis. Like, how are you supposed to refer to the people of Israel? You can't even mention the word Israel because it's normalization. It is such a radical take. Now, um, nothing, by the way, R.F. Kuang says in her scene, from what I've seen, talks about this character's politics, talks about this character's perspective on what the government is doing. This is sheerly a pianist who gives a piano concert, and as I understand, is a very minor character. So, does that paint a picture? Does that paint the irrational, fickle nature of the cancel mob? And by the way, I know I'm not going to convince anybody who is part of this cancel mob, whether the original one in 2019 or this one or both. But if you're teetering and you're wondering, like, should I or should I not be upset with what R. Kwan did? Just tell me, is that logical? Is that rational? Is it rational to literally be outraged for polar opposite understanding of the Jewish people? Um, it isn't to me, and it isn't to a lot of people. And in the words of one of my mutuals on Book Talk, she said, I got accused of being a white supremacist this week for defending an Asian author who mentioned a Jewish character. And last week I got accused of being white supremacist for defending a black author for, I forget what it was. Oh, it was the Tracy, I forget her name, full author name, where she like had a normal conversation with the reader and the reader got upset that she questioned a signing, like where she wanted to sign. Anyways, it's a ridiculous story, but there was like a cancel mob, an attempted cancel mob that came after this author too. Anyways, my mutual was like, does this make sense? I'm a white supremacist for defending these minority authors, when really my mutual is just talking about being against outrage culture and cancel culture. Um, so my point is everything has gotten so sensitive and so fickle and so outrageous within the realm of outrage culture that it's completely lost all rationality. And here's the thing. I'm not telling people to absolutely 100% like that book or like this book, and no matter what, you gotta like a book. No, no, no. You still have free will. You still have the right of hating a book in this country. And I'm not telling people to like books that they don't like. I'm just saying the nature of then congregating and trying to convince other people and riling people up uh, for outrage, even if they didn't particularly have the same reaction as you did, but trying to convince and start this machine of like, no, we have to start this bandwagon of like canceling this writer, getting this book off the market. That is what is actually the problem. If you yourself stop reading a certain author because you don't like either what they write or their opinions or their political stances, fine. It's the cancel culture itself that is the problem. So, um, another fascinating parallel that I've noticed is the same group that participates very heavily in cancel culture is very much in love with The Handmaid's Tale, or very much, vocalizes their hate for the witch burnings. Now, I'm also against witch burnings, okay? No, I don't like witch burnings. But what's so fascinating to me is that this crowd that's so vocal about witch burnings and the Handmaid's Tale participates in what is essentially symbolic witch burnings by joining these cancel mobs. You know, they are symbolically lighting the torches, putting a flame to writers' careers, books, and any, actually, not just writers, right? This happens to musicians, this happens to all kinds of creatives. So I hope this all makes sense. I hope that you haven't misconstrued what I said. Okay? Not defending any government system here. Just trying to point out the conflict by sharing these two cancellation stories, and how they're paradox, essentially. They're a paradox. Let me know what you guys think. Have you heard of either of these books and the cancel stories that happened? If you've heard of them, what did you think of the entire experience? And if you've heard of other cancel stories, let me know. Because at this point, I'm just collecting tales from the underbelly of cancellation. I want to know because it's just so fascinating to listen to. I hope you guys subscribe, join me for my next videos. I want to explore more about cancel culture and maybe share some personal stories as about being a refugee from the Soviet Union. I almost combined refugee with Soviet Union and said rough Viet Union. Anyways, being a refugee from the Soviet Union. Let me know what you guys think about this topic, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.